The whole purpose of this set of videos, which I should have mentioned at the very beginning, was what we can get away with on this Spanish 110 without putting a great deal of cash in it, because it went really, really well, but there was a couple of problems with it. And if you can remember, if you can cast your mind back, it had the wrong timing belt on, which was causing some damage, and also it had a problem with the water pump. The water pump housing was very badly damaged and corroded. So I took it out and I put a fully rebuilt engine in and just swapped all the ancillaries over, and away we went. It's a good engine. But what I noticed about it was how remarkably good it was for 300,000 kilometres, or 300,000 more, I can't remember. But on the last video I measured up the bores, and I forgot to mention, I'll try and re-edit the video, but I put a brand new ring in the bore, and it was beautiful. There was no need to rebore it. There was no scars in it, you could still see the honey marks, it was lovely. And I put an old ring in the bore, and it was just a little bit bigger, but new set of rings will cure that, which I actually have. I'm not sure if this is going to come out quite right, but I just happen to have on the shelf 4 sets of standard piston rings for a 300 TDI. So I put one in the bore here, which is sort of midway down on its stroke. Well, if I put it down too far you wouldn't be able to see it. But here the gap is a nice, well, it's 0.2 of a millimetre. That's excellent. This one here is a little bit opened up, it's got a little bit of wear on. I'm not sure if you can actually see that one, because I've got my light there. Well, maybe you can drop it down a bit. I can't get much closer. So what I did was, like I said, previously I've done the head, that's fine, I've got no problems with the head at all. Now I moved on to the block, took the crank out, etc, etc, and then in this video I'm going to show you what I did to the block. But before that, I want to show you a couple of little problems I had. If you can remember, this was the timing cover. It was all really filthy and mucky and stuff like this. So I put it through the sandblaster, and then I put it through the bead blaster, you know, the vapor honing machine, and then I put it through the ultrasonic machine to make sure there was no dirty little bally things in. And I put another cover on here, like the oil pump, because this was the old one, and it's got a few scratches in it, but it's too bad. I get JP to just put these on his surface grinder and he runs them across and makes them look like new, because he can't buy this bit for some reason. Now one of my problems was when I assembled it, I thought, oh, I've got some new gears on the shelf, OEM gears. Brilliant, I'll put them in. However, when I came to turn the pump, I filled it with Vaseline, and I found it was a couple of thousandths of an inch too large. The new gears wouldn't turn in here. They were tight. As you progressively tighten these bolts down, the pump started to lock up. So I thought, well, what the hell? So I dug out the old gears, and there was negligible wear on them. So I put them in, and it's fine. And you can drive them off these two dogs here with a bar. I have a bar with like a T handle on, and this pump works fine. So I did that, and I also, when I found it, wait a minute, is it falling down? I changed the spring in the oil pressure relief valve. As if you pocket. This is the old spring, and it was about 12 millimeters shorter than a new one. So a little something to look out for there. And again, plenty of Vaseline, make sure everything's working fine. And yeah, it's no problem at all. So that goes in the bin. Now, let's have a look at the block. Now, I am blessed by having a sandblaster and a power wash. Now, not a lot of people have got these things, but I'm sure if you were to take your engine block down to a local engine manufacturer's. They'd clean it up for a small charge. Saves you an awful lot of messing about. If you can get it hot acid dipped, even better. All right, but we haven't got that in our area, so sort of have to do it mostly myself. And if I took it up to CarQuest, they'll charge me as much as a new engine because they always find something else wrong. But there was nothing wrong with it. And here's the block after a sandblast. And I sandblasted. I took the frost plugs out, as you saw in the video previously. I took those out, blasted all inside here, got all the muck and the rubbish out, and I also blasted down through the casting holes. No, it's not really. Down through the water jacket here, from the back, from the front, and it's nice. Now I also, at the same time, I put some plates across where the cam is, because I didn't want to get any sand on the bushings, if you see what I mean, because the bushings were really good for the camshaft, really good, except for the front one. So I changed the front bush just on its own. I know it's a bit of a cop-out, but you know, you can go crazy, but the front bush is bigger than the back ones, if you see what I mean, and it looks like when somebody's been tightening the belt up too tight, it would pull the bush across. Let me see if I can find it. So there's the cam bush. And you can see there's a little bit of wear in it, not too bad, you know, but because this transfers oil to the head and things like this, to the rockery bits at the top, the things that go bounce up and down, we wanted to get maximum oil flow. Also, the bush that I put in, it was a later bush and it has a smaller hole here to keep the oil pressure into the crank and what have you. So changed that. So that was no big deal. Yeah, so everything's good. So I put the cam back in, that turns beautifully, no problems there, and got all the tappets done, that's all done. But a couple of things, you know, like people have been asking me about the cylinder head, and especially the cylinder head gasket. Now this is a Victor Reinz gasket. This is the old gasket that we took off. Because about 5 years ago, we had a problem with a tappet at the back, and for some strange reason the roller went a bit sort of octagonal, and I think, like I say, somebody's been in this before and put a cheaper roller in and it didn't last long, it was banging away. So of course the only way to get it out was to take the head off, and I put a Victor Reinz gasket on. Now it fared up quite nice, and it hadn't done a great deal of miles, about 4,000 kilometres. But you can see that the finish is coming off, and you can't use these twice. Well, you could in a very desperate situation if you're in the middle of nowhere. But the black stuff on here is it's like a sealer. So because you've always put these on dry, you never put any sealer on this. This is the sealer. Now, I'm not sure about other aftermarket head gaskets, whether it's a sealer or a black paint. The early days of the cheap ones were black paint, and it didn't really seal all that well. So just be careful of that. So that's why I always use Victor Reinz. They're made in Taiwan now, which is the end of the world, but the quality's very good. Now, something came up in the comments about these holes here. You know, see there? Really want to see those fingers. They said that these holes were for the HS 2.8 gasket, for the 2.8 engine, should I say. Well, they're not, because here is a picture of a 2.8 head, and there's no holes in it. So I don't know why they put them in the gasket when there's no hole in the head. Now, going back to that HS 2.8, it did have extra cooling holes in, and they were around here at the back. See, there's your little 3 holes there for the identification, and the other holes were at the back here. Now, you can buy a cylinder head for a 300 TDI with extra cooling in it, so this is a bit of a fake really, because what's the point? The block hasn't got the holes in, neither has the head, you know, the gasket. So bit of a waste of time really. Everything's exactly the same apart from those holes. Now this brings us to a point. Somebody was saying you could drill these out. to get better cooling. I wouldn't advise anybody to drill holes into heads and gaskets and blocks unless you really, really know what you're doing. Honestly, you could end up with a real bigger problem than you started out with, because you see, these engines were designed a little bit different to HS 2.8s. We can see here when we get the camera sorted out, this is part of the water jacket. This comes from your water pump, and water comes through here and through the block here. However, on the HS 2.8 they extended this to go to the middle of the block, and of course there was different holes in the back. Alright, so it had better cooling. Why? Because the HS 2.8 was working a lot harder than this. For myself, like I say, I wouldn't be tempted to drill other holes. I think down here I've got the... There. Now, can we see here? See the little stain there where the triangular piece has been for the gasket? This has had antifreeze in it, so it didn't corrode. But you can see where my thumb is there? There's a web here. So even if you drilled it out, you're going to take away that reinforcement that's in there. Now, they wouldn't have put a web in if there wasn't any need for it, because it's obviously supporting the head bolt and things like this, so I would leave well alone. Not unless you want to play around with it. Not unless you want to play around with it yourself, and it's your risk, but standard is best, in my opinion. But like I say, you can't modify this water jacket any better. That's the downside. But one of the reasons for cleaning it out, and you saw the state of the core plugs, was to say that, you know, you can build up rust inside these, and you get no cooling passage, you know, coolant circulation anywhere. When I was a lad and all these were green fields, when we used to do tractors, they used to sort of overheat because they were always filling them up from bloody horse troughs and things like this, and places where sheep used to have a drink. And it was full of twigs and sticks and all sorts. And I used to take the car plugs out, and it was absolutely solid mud and rubbish. That's why they were overheating. They had no, they didn't bother with coolant. They just drained it, you know, in winter time they just drained it off. What was left of the water. But again, with the plug being down here, you know, you'd open it up and then nothing would come out. Funny old world, isn't it, eh? So buying coolant, even the cheapest coolant, is better than no coolant, believe me. It's just to stop the corrosion. Now, another thing I wanted to show you whilst I'm rambling on at this bit is the crankshaft, because a couple of questions have come up in the comments about the cranks. This is a crank I took out of an engine many years ago because I reported there was a little bit of wear here where the oil pump's driven off. Let me see if I can find an oil pump drive. Here's one here, look. And that goes on the end of here and drives off the end of the crank. And you can see that's a little bit loose. So the customer wanted a new crank in. No problem at all. So, as you can see here, this crank's got wear just in there and the same at the opposite side, making it a bit loose. Now, people have been asking me, how do you repair that? Can you weld it? Well, it's cast iron. If you're a good cast iron welder. Now, I took this down to a shop who does my cranks. They actually send them away to Montreal to get done, and it's like $75 there, $75 back, to tell me it costs $350 to fix it. And I was chatting with JP the other day, and he says, there's no need for that, Mike. He says, all we have to do is put it in the milling machine and put two flats on here. Put two flats at 90 degrees. And he says it'll be fine. It won't cause any damage. There's no heat problems or anything like that. So there's a suggestion. I'll throw that open to you. I haven't done one, and but it could save the crank. You know, there's no need to keep buying them. Now, Land Rover reckoned that you can only do these, what was it, to 10,000th of an inch under. I'm using thousandths of an inch now. But These are the same bearing sizes as the old 2 1/4s, you know, like the old 5 bearing engines. And they can get down to what, 40, 60 thousandth of an inch. Now, the crank machine shop said there's no reason why you can't keep grinding them. I don't know. Land Rover said it for a reason, but then again, Land Rover said that whenever you had a cylinder head that was warped, you had to buy a new head. Well, that was nonsense. All you had to do was grind the head down, you know, machine the head down, and cut the valve seats back so the standoff between the face and the valve face was up to factory spec. There was a ½ an inch of meat on there, or 13 millimetres of thickness of metal, so taking a couple of thousandth of an inch I think going to hurt anybody, as long as you do it proportionately. But the cranks, I don't know. I don't know why they say that. It'd be an interesting experiment to see, because the bearings do exist, but they're not for a 300 TDI. You won't see them listed for a 300 TDI or a 200 TDI, but they're the same as the old 2.5 petrols and 2 1/4 petrols, 5 bearings. So, I don't know. Apparently, when you look at the book, there's a little lip on the side of the crank pin, if you see what I mean. So it's raised and then it's machined underneath. And by machining it too deep, again, I couldn't understand what the problem was if you machined that out and it was parallel instead of a little raised step, if you see what I mean. You'll know if you've done these engines, but like I said, unless a crank is cracked or anything like that, I'm sure we can salvage them again. And of course, being here in Canada, we try to salvage as much stuff as we can, because buying a crank, as you know, ain't cheap. So that's just a few little things I wanted to say today, what we got up to on this section of the engine. What am I waiting for? I'm waiting for the bearings to come. I've got the rings, I've got gaskets, I've got the head, I've got everything together, so this won't take very long at all to reassemble and make sure it's good. Not too bad. I'll tell you what the outlay is at the end of the video. It ain't all that much, and then we'll have a perfectly good motor. I say. Sometimes it does come together, you know. See you later.